The whole church believed Adrian was a grieving son-in-law. They watched him hold Denise's hand and wipe her tears. Nobody asked about Gloria. Miles away, Gloria sat on the cold floor of a locked bedroom, watching her mother's funeral through a cracked phone screen. But the sealed envelope handed out at the end of the service wasn't addressed to him. The morning of the funeral, Gloria woke up before the sun. She had barely slept, the kind of sleeplessness that doesn't come from noise but from silence. The silence of knowing the one person who always answered your call would never pick up again. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the wall. Then she got up, slowly, like a woman carrying something heavy that nobody else could see. She had ironed her black dress the night before, hung it on the back of the bedroom door like a quiet promise to herself. It wasn't expensive. She had found it at a second-hand shop 3 towns over and spent 2 hours trying it on, smoothing the fabric in the mirror, imagining the worst day of her life and trying to look strong enough to survive it. She brushed her hair slowly, rubbed lotion into her hands the way her mother used to, starting with the knuckles, then working down to the fingertips. She stood in front of the mirror and tried to hold herself together. Her mother, Ruth, had been gone for 4 days. 4 days of moving through the house like a ghost. 4 days of picking up the phone to call a number that would never answer. And today was the day she was supposed to say goodbye. Adrian came into the room at 7:15. He didn't knock. He never knocked. That was the kind of man he had become, the kind who entered rooms like they owed him something. He walked past Gloria without looking at her face and pulled the black dress off the hanger with one hand. Gloria's lips parted. She reached for the dress instinctively, the way you reach for something falling, but he had already folded it under his arm and turned toward the door. "You're not going," he said. Not a question, not a discussion, a verdict delivered in a voice that expected no appeal. Gloria's throat tightened. She asked why. Her voice cracked on the word like thin ice under a boot. Adrian didn't turn around. He said she would embarrass him, said she had been too emotional lately and the family didn't need her falling apart in public. He said it the same way a man cancels a dinner reservation. Cold, routine, administrative. Like her grief was an inconvenience. Like burying her mother was something she needed permission to do. Then he walked out of the room, and Gloria heard the lock turn from the outside. The click was small, ordinary, the kind of sound a key makes 1,000 times in a lifetime, but this time it sounded like a door closing on everything she thought her life was supposed to be. She stood there for a long time. Her hand was still reaching for a dress that was no longer there. She pressed her forehead against the door and whispered his name. No answer. She heard the car start. She heard the engine pull out of the driveway. She heard the street go quiet. And then there was nothing. Just the hum of an empty house and the weight of a woman realizing she had just been erased from her own mother's funeral. At the church, Adrian arrived, looking every bit the grieving son-in-law. Dark suit, polished shoes, a face that carried just enough sadness to seem sincere, but not enough to crack. He walked through the parking lot with his shoulders squared, shaking hands, accepting condolences he hadn't earned. Denise walked beside him wearing Gloria's black dress, the one Gloria had picked out herself, the one she had bought with money she saved by skipping lunches for 3 weeks so she could look dignified when she buried her mother. And now it was pressed against the body of the woman who had been sleeping with her husband for the past 11 months. Adrian's mother, Lorraine, stood at the church entrance like a woman guarding a throne. She was the kind of woman who measured people by where they came from, and she had measured Gloria from the very beginning and found her lacking. She smiled wide when she saw Denise and reached for her hands with both of hers. "You look lovely, sweetheart," she said. She kissed Denise on the cheek and walked her inside like she was escorting royalty. Adrian's sister, Patrice, appeared from behind a pew and handed Denise a tissue before the service even started. She leaned close and whispered, "You're more family than she ever was." The words hung in the air like perfume. Sweet on the surface, poison underneath. Nobody asked where Gloria was. Not one person in that building turned around and said, "Where is Ruth's daughter?" Not the deacons, not the choir director, not even the cousins who had eaten at Ruth's table every Thanksgiving for 20 years. They just accepted it, accepted the absence like it was natural, like Gloria had never existed at all. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that she was locked out, but that nobody noticed. The pastor opened the service with a prayer. The choir sang Ruth's favorite hymn, the one about crossing over troubled water. The congregation stood and held hands, and Denise stood in the front row, holding the hands of Gloria's own children, bowing her head like she belonged there, like she had earned the right to mourn a woman she had never met, like the dress she wore hadn't been stolen from a locked room and the seat she sat in hadn't been emptied by a deadbolt. Miles away, Gloria sat on the cold bathroom floor with her phone propped against the base of the toilet. She had scrolled through every social media page she could think of until she found the live stream on a cousin's Facebook page. The video was shaky. The audio crackled. The connection kept buffering, but she could see everything. She could see her mother's casket covered in white lilies, Ruth's favorite flower. She could see Adrian sitting in the front row with his arm around Denise. She could see her children, her babies, sitting beside a stranger and calling no one Mama. When the pastor said, "Family, please rise," Denise stood up. She rose from that pew like she had earned the right to be counted among Ruth's people. And Gloria, the woman who had bathed Ruth during her last weeks, who had held her hand when the doctors said there was nothing more they could do, who had promised her mother she would be strong. Gloria pressed her hand over her mouth and cried without making a sound. She didn't scream, she didn't pound the floor. She just folded into herself and let the grief pour out silently because even in her worst moment, she was still the woman Ruth had raised, dignified, even in destruction. She watched the entire service like that, on her knees, on a bathroom floor, through a cracked screen. Her mother was being lowered into the ground and she wasn't there. She wasn't there because a man who swore to love her decided she wasn't worthy of grief, and the world just let it happen. At the end of the service, the funeral director approached Adrian in the church vestibule. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a quiet voice, and he carried a sealed envelope in his hands. It was cream-colored, thick, with handwriting on the front that looked like it had been written slowly and carefully, the handwriting of someone who wanted every letter to count. Adrian reached for it casually, the way a man reaches for a receipt. The director pulled it back gently and said, "This is addressed to Gloria Harris. Only Gloria." Adrian's jaw tightened. His smile slipped for half a second before he caught it and pressed it back into place. Lorraine leaned over from behind his shoulder and whispered, "What could that woman possibly have left behind? She didn't even own her house." Denise rolled her eyes and checked her phone like the whole thing was beneath her attention. Adrian forced a warm smile, thanked the director, and slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of his coat. He patted the pocket twice like he was putting something to sleep. He never mentioned it to anyone. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever. To understand who Gloria was, really was, you had to understand where she came from, and where she came from was a small town in rural Georgia where the roads turned to dirt after the last gas station, and the only sound at night was the hum of cicadas and the slow creak of screen doors. The kind of town where everybody knew your name and your grandmother's name and exactly how much money your family didn't have. Gloria's mother, Ruth, was the kind of woman who never raised her voice but could silence a room with a single look. She cleaned houses for wealthy families for over 30 years. She never complained. Not once. Not when her knees swelled from kneeling on marble floors. Not when the families she worked for handed her Christmas bonuses that wouldn't cover a week of groceries. She woke up at 4 in the morning, took 2 buses, and spent her days scrubbing floors and folding sheets for people who never learned her last name. And every night she came home, kissed Gloria on the forehead, and said the same thing. They'll try to make you small, baby girl. Don't you let them. Not ever. Ruth never had much in the way of material things. She wore the same 3 church dresses on rotation, navy, gray, and cream, and rotated them so carefully that people thought she had more. She cut coupons from the Sunday paper and kept a jar of coins on the kitchen counter that she called her someday fund. But she had one piece of jewelry, a thin gold bracelet she bought at a pawn shop the year Gloria was born. It cost her $22, almost a full day's pay back then. She gave it to Gloria on her 16th birthday and said, "This is everything I got, and it's yours." Gloria still wore it. Every single day. Even when Adrian told her it looked cheap. Even when Lorraine glanced at it during family dinners and said nothing, which was somehow worse than saying something. Gloria met Adrian during her 2nd year of college. He was tall, confident, well-spoken, and came from a prominent black family in Atlanta that owned property and attended the right churches and sat on the right boards. His mother wore designer clothes to Sunday service. His sister had a condo and a luxury car before she turned 25. And Adrian had the kind of charm that made women forget to ask the right questions. He could make you feel like the only person in a room full of people. He could make you laugh until your ribs ached. He told Gloria he loved her within 3 months, told her he would protect her, told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And Gloria believed him because nobody had ever said those things to her before. Not once, not in 20 years of living. They married young. Gloria dropped out of college 2 semesters before finishing, gave up her dream of becoming a teacher to support Adrian's real estate career. She cooked every meal, cleaned every room, raised 2 children with patience and warmth and a gentleness that came from watching Ruth do the same thing for decades. She smiled at dinner parties and laughed at jokes that weren't funny and stood beside a man who slowly started looking through her instead of at her. The shift was so gradual she almost didn't notice it. Like a room getting darker 1 shade at a time until you're sitting in the dark and can't remember when the light left. Over the years, she became invisible in her own home. Adrian stopped asking about her day, stopped touching her shoulder when he passed behind her chair. Lorraine stopped inviting her to family events unless she needed someone to set the table or wash dishes. And Patrice made small comments that landed like paper cuts. "You should really do something with your hair, Gloria." Or, "It must be hard coming from nothing." Nobody said these things loudly. Nobody was ever cruel enough to be direct. It was always wrapped in a smile. Always delivered with a hand on the shoulder and a tilt of the head that said, "I'm trying to help." Gloria endured all of it, not because she was weak, because she made a promise, because Ruth raised her to keep her word, because she believed that love was supposed to be hard sometimes, and that a good woman stayed even when staying cost her everything. She didn't know yet, not fully, that love was not supposed to feel like disappearing. What nobody knew, not Gloria, not Adrian, not a single person sitting in that church, was that Ruth had been quietly building something extraordinary for over 40 years. It started with a woman named Colette Franklin. Colette was one of the families Ruth cleaned for in the early 80s, a young tech entrepreneur working out of her garage in a suburb outside Atlanta, before the word startup meant anything to most people. Most of the families Ruth worked for treated her like she was part of the furniture. But Colette was different. She talked to Ruth like a person. She invited her to sit down and eat lunch at the dining table instead of standing in the kitchen. She asked about Gloria. She remembered birthdays. She sent cards during the holidays with handwritten notes inside. And one year, when Colette's company began to take real shape, she did something no one expected. She gave Ruth equity in the company. Not as payment, not as charity, as a gift between 2 women who respected each other in a world that respected neither of them enough. Ruth never touched it. She didn't even fully understand what equity meant at first, but Colette explained it to her over the years. Slowly, patiently, the way you teach someone to read a map. And Ruth watched quietly as the numbers grew. She never told anyone, never changed her lifestyle, never stopped cleaning houses or riding 2 buses to work. She just kept the documents in a fireproof box under her bed and updated her will every few years, adding 1 line each time, always addressed to the same person, Gloria. By the time Ruth passed, that equity, combined with decades of reinvestment, dividend compounding, and the meteoric rise of Colette's company into a global technology empire, had grown into a fortune so large it didn't seem real. All of it left to one person, her daughter, the woman locked in a bedroom, the woman who wasn't allowed to say goodbye. 3 days after the funeral, Gloria saw the photo that broke something inside her she didn't even know was still whole. She was scrolling through her phone absently, the way grief makes you do things without purpose, when she landed on Denise's Instagram page. And there it was, a photo of Denise standing beside Ruth's casket, wearing Gloria's black dress, one hand resting on the polished wood like she had any right to touch it. The caption read, "Family is everything. Rest in peace, Mama Ruth." Mama Ruth. 2 words that hit Gloria harder than any fist ever could. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred and the letters melted into shapes she couldn't read anymore. Adrian was tagged in the photo. He had liked it. Lorraine had commented a heart emoji. Patrice had replied with 3 crying faces and the words, "So proud of you, sis." Gloria set the phone down slowly. Her hands were cold. Her chest felt hollow. She didn't cry this time. She had already used up everything she had. There was nothing left to pour out, just an empty container shaped like a woman. A week later, Adrian's family hosted a Sunday dinner at Lorraine's house. Gloria wasn't invited. Adrian told her to stay home and rest. "You've been through a lot," he said, with a voice that almost sounded kind. Like locking her out of her own mother's funeral was an act of compassion and not cruelty. Like isolation was medicine and not punishment. Gloria sat in the living room alone with the television off and listened to the clock tick. Each second sounded louder than the last. At the dinner, the family sat around Lorraine's long mahogany table and ate pot roast and potato salad and laughed like nothing had happened. Patrice made a joke about Gloria losing her mind. She said it casually, between bites, the way someone mentions that it might rain later. "Gloria's been off for a while now," she said, shaking her head. "I honestly don't know how Adrian handles it." Lorraine nodded like a judge agreeing with a verdict and said, "I always told him he married the wrong woman. But he didn't listen. Men never do." Adrian said nothing. He didn't defend his wife. He didn't correct the lie. He just poured more wine into his glass and leaned back in his chair while Denise rubbed his shoulder and whispered something in his ear that made him smile. A smile that should have belonged to his wife, in a seat that should have been hers. Gloria asked about the envelope 3 times. The first time was 2 days after the funeral. She asked quietly, the way she asked for everything, with enough softness that it could be ignored. Adrian waved his hand and said it was nothing, just old paperwork from the church. The second time was a week later. She asked again with a little more weight behind the words. Adrian told her to stop bringing it up, said she was being obsessive. The third time, she stood in the doorway of his office and said, "That envelope had my name on it, Adrian. I want to see it." His voice got loud and sharp. He stood up from his desk and said, "Your mother had nothing, Gloria. Nothing. Whatever she left behind isn't worth the paper it's written on. Let it go." He hid the envelope inside the bottom drawer of his desk. Underneath a stack of old folders and tax documents he knew Gloria would never touch. He didn't open it. He didn't care what was inside. He just didn't want Gloria to have anything that didn't come through him first. That was the kind of man Adrian was. Not the kind who hit you. The kind who removed things from your life slowly enough that you forgot you ever had them. That night, Gloria sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Her hands rested in her lap like they had forgotten what they were for. Something inside her had shifted. Not into anger. Not yet. Into something quieter. Colder. Numbness. The kind that comes after you've been hurt so many times your body stops flinching. The kind that makes you look calm on the outside while everything on the inside shuts down like lights going off in an empty building, one floor at a time. The thing that finally cracked the numbness wasn't a word. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even Adrian's voice. It was an earring, small, gold, with a tiny red stone that caught the light when Gloria turned it between her fingers. She found it in her bed. Not on the nightstand. Not on the floor beside the bed. In the bed. Between the sheets she had washed and folded that same morning. She held it in her palm for a long time, turning it over, studying it, like she was trying to convince herself it meant something else. Something innocent. But there was nothing innocent left in this house. She already knew that. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the earring across the room. She didn't call Adrian's name or pound on any door. She set it gently on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed with her hand wrapped around the thin gold bracelet her mother had given her. She pressed it against her chest like a prayer and whispered, "Mama, I don't know how much more I can take." That night she dreamed of Ruth. Her mother was standing in a field of tall grass wearing her Sunday dress, the navy one, holding the bracelet up to the sun. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just smiled, that full, warm, knowing smile that said everything words couldn't. And when Gloria woke up the next morning, something was different. The numbness was gone. In its place was a quiet fire. Not loud, not reckless. Not the kind that burns everything down, the kind that burns steady, like a pilot light that had finally caught after being blown out too many times. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon while Adrian was out with Denise. The house was empty. The sunlight came through the kitchen window at a low angle and threw long shadows across the floor. Gloria walked into Adrian's office for the first time in months. She opened the bottom drawer, moved the old folders aside, and there it was. The envelope, cream-colored, thick, her name written across the front in her mother's handwriting. That small, careful script that slanted slightly to the right, the way it always had. Gloria's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. 3 pages. Ruth's words. The same voice Gloria had heard every night of her childhood, now speaking from beyond the grave with the same steady warmth it had always carried. Behind the letter was a legal document from the estate attorney of a woman named Colette Franklin, and behind that was a single sheet of paper with numbers on it that Gloria had to read 4 times before her brain accepted what her eyes were seeing. She was the sole inheritor of a fortune worth $85 billion. Equity holdings, property portfolios, trust funds, 40 years of silent accumulation from a woman who scrubbed floors and rode 2 buses to work every morning and never once complained about the weight she carried. Ruth had built a kingdom without making a sound. Gloria unfolded the letter and read the last paragraph through tears that fell onto the paper and blurred the ink at the edges. "I cleaned their floors so you would never have to. Wear the bracelet, stand tall, and never let anyone lock a door on you again." Gloria sat on the office floor for over an hour. She didn't move. She didn't call anyone. She just held the letter against her chest and breathed. Slow, deep, like a woman learning how to fill her lungs again after years of holding her breath. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt like the air actually belonged to her. What happened next was the quietest revolution anyone had ever seen. Gloria didn't scream. She didn't confront Adrian. She didn't pack a bag or slam a door or throw that earring at his chest the way part of her wanted to. She did something far more dangerous than any of that. She planned. Over the next 3 weeks, Gloria contacted the estate attorney privately using a phone Adrian didn't know she had. She met with a legal team in a downtown office building while Adrian thought she was at the grocery store. She signed documents in quiet conference rooms with views of the city skyline and returned home in time to have dinner on the table by 6. She filed for divorce. She moved assets into protected trusts for her children. She set up a foundation in Ruth's name. She did all of it without changing a single thing about her daily routine. She still cooked dinner every night, still cleaned the house, still folded Adrian's shirts the way he liked them. Collar down, sleeves tucked, still said good morning and good night with the same flat expression she had worn for years. Adrian saw exactly what he expected to see. A woman who had finally given up. A woman who had accepted her place beneath him. He told Denise one evening over drinks at a rooftop bar, "She's finally broken. She won't be a problem anymore." Denise laughed, a short, sharp laugh that sounded like a door slamming, and said, "She was never a problem to begin with." They clinked glasses and toasted to a future that was already crumbling beneath their feet. They just didn't know it yet. But Gloria did. Every year, Adrian's family hosted their annual charity gala. It was the kind of event where people wore custom gowns and rented luxury cars just for the entrance and talked about philanthropy like it was a personality trait. The guest list included Atlanta's elite: politicians, business owners, pastors with television ministries, and socialites who measured friendship by net worth. It was Lorraine's proudest night of the year. She planned it for months. She controlled every detail: the flowers, the seating chart, the lighting, the music, the speeches. And this year, she made one thing very clear. Gloria was not invited. Gloria was not mentioned. Gloria did not exist. Adrian arrived with Denise on his arm. She wore a deep green gown and smiled like a woman who had already won. Lorraine greeted them at the entrance with kisses on both cheeks. Patrice was on the planning committee and had personally removed Gloria's name from every list. The room was full, the champagne was flowing, the music was soft, the chandeliers cast golden circles on the ceiling, and everyone in that room believed they were untouchable. Then Gloria walked in. She came through the front doors like she had been expected all along. No hesitation, no apology in her posture. She wore a white gown, simple, elegant, fitted at the waist, flowing at the hem, the kind of dress that didn't need jewelry or logos to make a statement. Her hair was pulled back, her shoulders were straight, her chin was lifted, and on her wrist, catching the warm light from the chandelier above, was the thin gold bracelet her mother had given her 30 years ago. The same bracelet Adrian called cheap. The same bracelet Lorraine pretended not to see. The same bracelet Ruth bought with a full day's pay at a pawn shop the year her daughter was born. Gloria was flanked by 2 attorneys in dark suits and the estate representative of Colette Franklin's foundation. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It happened in waves. First the people nearest the door, then the ones standing at the bar, then the tables closest to the stage. One by one, heads turned. Conversations dropped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Forks stopped over plates. Adrian saw her from across the room and his face went pale. His glass stopped moving. Denise grabbed his arm so hard her knuckles whitened. Lorraine whispered to Patrice, "What is she doing here?" Patrice didn't answer. She couldn't. Gloria didn't rush. She didn't scan the room for Adrian or flinch when she felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes pressing against her skin. She walked to the front of the room the way a woman walks when she has already decided how the night will end and nothing anyone says can change it. She stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the crowd. The room was completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just mean nobody is talking. The kind that means everybody is holding their breath. "My name is Gloria Harris," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, almost soft, like she was telling a bedtime story to a room that wasn't ready to hear it. Most of you don't know who I am, and that's by design. I've been hidden for a very long time, not because I chose to be, but because the people who were supposed to love me decided I was easier to erase than to respect. She paused, let the words settle into every corner of the room, looked down at her bracelet for a moment, then lifted her eyes and continued. 3 weeks ago, my mother, Ruth Harris, was laid to rest. She was a housekeeper. She rode 2 buses to work every day for 30 years. She never owned a car. She wore the same 3 dresses to church, and she was the most powerful woman I've ever known. The room was motionless. Lorraine's smile had completely vanished. Adrian's jaw was locked tight enough to crack a tooth. On the day of her funeral, I was locked inside my own bedroom by my husband. He took the dress I'd bought to bury my mother in, bought with money I saved by skipping meals, and he gave it to another woman. He drove that woman to the church in my car. He sat her in my seat. He let her hold my children's hands. He let her stand when the pastor said, "Family, please rise." And he told the congregation I was too unstable to attend. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Denise's face went gray. She shifted in her chair and looked toward the exit. Patrice stared at the floor like she was trying to fall through it. Lorraine gripped the edge of the table with both hands. But my mother left me something. Something none of you knew about. Something my husband was too dismissive to even open. She held up the cream-colored envelope so the room could see Ruth's handwriting on the front. My mother, the housekeeper, the woman who had nothing. She left me an inheritance that would take most of the people in this room several lifetimes to earn. She built it silently, patiently, without telling a soul, because she wanted to make sure that one day no one could ever lock a door on me again. She didn't say the number. She didn't need to. The estate representative stepped forward and handed a single-page summary to the event coordinator, who unfolded it, read it silently, and looked up at Gloria with eyes so wide they caught the chandelier light. The coordinator's hands trembled as she set the paper down. Gloria looked across the room at Adrian. He was frozen. His skin had lost its color. His mouth was slightly open, but no words were coming out. Denise had already dropped his arm and moved 6 inches to the left, creating distance the way animals do when they sense danger coming. "You told me my mother had nothing," Gloria said. Her voice hadn't changed. Still calm, still steady, still soft. "You told me whatever she left behind wasn't worth the paper it was written on." She paused. "Let the silence do the work. Let it sit in Adrian's chest like a stone. She had more than you could ever dream of, and she gave it all to me, the woman you locked in a room." She didn't wait for a response. She didn't need one. She turned away from the microphone, walked past the tables, past the open mouths and dropped forks and frozen champagne flutes, past the whispers that were already spreading like fire across dry grass. She left the room the same way she entered it, with her shoulders straight, her bracelet catching the light, and not a single tear on her face. The aftermath came fast and without mercy. Gloria's legal team moved with the kind of precision that only money and preparation can buy. The divorce was finalized within weeks. Adrian fought it. Of course he did. He hired 3 different attorneys. He demanded access to the inheritance. He claimed emotional distress. He filed motions and appeals and delays that went nowhere. But every legal document was airtight. Every trust was sealed. The inheritance had been secured in Gloria's name before the divorce was even filed. Adrian walked away with nothing. Not a dollar, not a share, not even the dignity of pretending he hadn't lost. His real estate business collapsed within 3 months. Investors pulled out one by one after the gala scandal spread through Atlanta's social circles like wildfire. Nobody wanted their name associated with his anymore. The man who once walked into rooms like he owned them now sat in a half-empty office, staring at a phone that had stopped ringing. He called Gloria 17 times over the span of 2 weeks. She never answered. Not once. He left voicemails that started with anger and ended with begging. Long, rambling messages where his voice cracked and his pride dissolved into something that sounded almost like regret but was really just fear. She deleted every single one without listening past the first word. Denise disappeared like smoke through a cracked window. The day she realized Adrian had nothing left to offer, no money, no status, no future worth standing next to. She packed a single bag while he was out trying to save what was left of his business and left the apartment without writing a note. She changed her number. Deleted the funeral photo from her Instagram. Blocked Adrian on every platform she had. Patrice told him months later, with a cruelty disguised as honesty, that Denise had been seeing someone else before the gala. A real estate developer from Houston who drove a better car and didn't carry the kind of baggage that Adrian now dragged behind him like a chain. Adrian sat with that information for a long time in a quiet apartment that smelled like perfume that wasn't there anymore. It didn't hurt the way he expected it to. It just made him feel stupid. The particular kind of stupid that comes from realizing the person you destroyed your marriage for never saw you as anything more than a placeholder, a warm seat until something better came along. Lorraine tried. She tried the only way she knew how, with a text message that cost her nothing and risked even less. It read, "Gloria, I think we should talk. We're still family." Gloria didn't respond for 3 days. She read the message once, set the phone down, and went back to planting sunflowers in her garden. On the 3rd day, she picked up the phone and typed one message back. "You said I was beneath your family. You stood in a church and let another woman take my place at my mother's funeral. You didn't ask where I was. You didn't check on me. You sat at dinner tables where my name was the punchline and you laughed along. I wish you well, Lorraine, I truly do. But we are not family. We never were." Lorraine read the message 4 times. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say that would undo what had already been done. Her social circle started pulling away slowly. The women who once praised her annual gala began declining invitations with vague excuses and unanswered calls. The church that had embraced her for decades began whispering behind her back. Patrice moved to another city 3 months later and stopped returning her calls entirely. Lorraine sat alone in a house full of expensive furniture and framed photographs of a family that no longer existed and realized, for the first time in her life, what it felt like to be erased. And she understood, too late, the way understanding always comes, that she had taught her son exactly how to do it. Gloria didn't buy a mansion. She didn't buy a yacht or a private island or a penthouse with a view of the skyline. She bought a house near the coast, modest by the standards of what she could afford, warm, quiet, with wide windows that let the sunlight pour across the hardwood floors every morning and fill the rooms with the kind of golden light that makes everything feel like it's healing. She planted a garden in the backyard. Tomatoes, herbs, sunflowers. The same things Ruth used to grow behind their house in Georgia. She could spend hours out there, hands in the soil, sun on her back, not thinking about anything at all, just growing things, just being alive, just breathing air that finally felt like it belonged to her. Her children visited every weekend. They ate dinner together at a round wooden table with no assigned seating and no rules about who could speak first. They talked about school and music and movies, and sometimes, when the light was right and the evening was warm, they talked about Ruth, about her laugh, about her cornbread, about the way she could hum a hymn so softly it sounded like the house itself was singing. Gloria laughed more in those evenings than she had in the last 10 years of her marriage. She read books on the porch in the afternoons. She walked barefoot through the wet grass in the morning and felt the earth beneath her feet like a woman who had finally landed somewhere solid after years of falling through floors that were never hers. She opened the Ruth Harris Community Foundation. It funded scholarships for the children of domestic workers, Housekeepers, janitors, cooks, nannies, home health aides, women and men like Ruth, people who cleaned other people's homes and then went home to raise kings and queens of their own. The foundation grew quickly. Within a year, it had helped over 300 families send their children to college. Within 2, it was operating in 12 states. Gloria didn't put her own name on the building. She put Ruth's in gold letters above the front door, because this was never about Gloria's story. It was about every woman who was told she had nothing and built something the world wasn't ready for without saying a single word. On a quiet afternoon in early spring, Gloria drove to the cemetery alone. She brought sunflowers, Ruth's favorite. She placed them beside the headstone and sat down on the grass, tucking her legs beneath her the way she used to sit in Ruth's kitchen as a little girl waiting for dinner. She rested her fingers on the cool stone and let the silence settle around her like a blanket she didn't want to take off. She spoke quietly. The way you speak to someone you know is still listening. I stood tall, Mama. I wore the bracelet, and I didn't let them keep the door locked. She sat there until the sun began its slow descent behind the trees. The sky turned gold, then soft pink, then a deep, quiet purple that looked like the inside of a promise. She closed her eyes and let the breeze move across her face. She felt peace. Real peace. Not the peace that comes from revenge or from watching someone else fall. Not the peace that comes from proving someone wrong. The kind that comes from finally standing inside the life your mother dreamed for you, and knowing that every step you took to get there, every locked door and stolen dress and silent tear and sleepless night was worth it. Because you're here now, standing, breathing, free, and nobody, not a single soul on this earth, can take that away. Some people don't just hurt you. They rewrite your place in your own life. They sit where you sat. They wear what you chose. They speak your name like it never carried weight. And the worst part, the world believes them. Not because they're right, but because you are silent. But understand this. Silence is not surrender. It's timing. And one day, the same room that erased you will have no choice but to watch you return. Not louder, not angrier, just untouchable. So if this story stayed with you, don't ignore that feeling, because one question matters more than anything. When your moment comes, will you speak, or will you let them keep your life?